The American economy has been long considered a symbol of opportunity and wealth, but current developments imply that many people may need help to realize their dreams of economic growth. The cost of living is increasing rapidly, personal debt is skyrocketing, and younger generations are finding it difficult to keep up. Concurrently, the income disparity between the elder and younger cohorts is expanding, and the prospect of career advancement is becoming increasingly implausible. But why is this? Does the average American have a future? Well, join us as we find out why the economic future of many Americans looks increasingly uncertain. Let's get started. Today, the American dream is almost dead, despite formerly being a symbol of opportunity and wealth. In the past, this ideal dictated that everybody could succeed and move up the social ladder with effort and willpower, regardless of background. An expanding economy, reasonably priced housing, and rising salaries all contributed to this ideal by enabling many people to own houses, land lucrative jobs, and amass riches. But this goal has become almost impossible over the years, leading many to wonder if it's still achievable. The American dream was still very much alive in 1985, with the average home costing around 4.5 times the median household income. Homeownership was within reach for the majority of people. As a result, a lot of families were able to accumulate equity and buy homes. Wages were gradually increasing, and although attending college was expensive, it was thought to be a wise investment that would increase one's earning potential. When we fast forward to the present, the situation is very different. Nowadays, the average home costs almost 7 times the income of an ordinary household, making home ownership increasingly unaffordable for many people, especially the younger generation. The cost of living has also increased, but wages have remained the same. It now appears that there are many obstacles to the once reliable road to financial success. Since 1980, tuition has quadrupled, significantly exceeding salary growth, leaving many graduates with decades-long student debt loans. Because the expense of a college education has increased faster than the value of a degree, the return on investment has decreased. In addition, the job market has changed, and there are now fewer secure and well-paying jobs available. Financial instability has been exacerbated by the replacement of many traditional job opportunities by gig and contract labor. The likelihood of obtaining financial stability by conventional means, such as purchasing a property or landing a steady job, has decreased as housing prices and living expenses rise. There is a clear disparity between the hopeful aspirations of the past and the current state of the economy. Today's young Americans must contend with high debt, growing expenses, and constrained economic mobility. This disappointment illustrates how fundamental shifts in the economy have changed the opportunities available to people, reflecting a wider downturn in the promise of the American dream. The hard reality of a more difficult economic climate has cast a shadow on the previously seemingly attainable goal for many. And it's not just that. The emergence of corporate and private equity ownership in the housing market has been one of the biggest problems in the current real estate environment. Private equity companies have made large acquisitions of single-family houses across the US in recent years for investments. At the moment, these companies possess around 240,000 single-family houses, which accounts for a large chunk of the rental market. Due to the concentration of private equity in some areas, these companies have a significant influence on regional housing markets. Through the acquisition of several properties in a certain location, private equity firms are able to control market dynamics to their benefit. Their ability to concentrate allows them to impact rental pricing and lower the cost of property management, which frequently results in higher rentals. In comparison to national averages, rent hikes have been noticeably greater in areas like Tampa, Phoenix, and Atlanta, where private equity ownership is particularly strong. For example, rents in these locations increased by 44%, 43%, and 35% between 2020 and 2023, respectively, far more than the 24% national rise in rent. The game played here is dirty. Now, as we have mentioned, a significant amount of the rental market is controlled by private equity corporations, which has reduced the number of available properties for prospective purchasers. To maximize rental revenue, these companies frequently stay on properties longer, which lowers the number of houses offered for sale and worsens the scarcity of housing supply. Due to the competitive climate created by this circumstance, it becomes more difficult for individual purchasers and smaller investors to get properties, which raises prices and makes home ownership even more unattainable. Now, what makes it more diabolical is that these same players participate in the manipulation of rental costs using data analytics. Private equity-owned firms, such as RealPage, have come under fire for assisting landlords in setting rents using complex algorithms that maximize price for millions of units. Because these algorithms allow landlords to coordinate rent hikes while essentially avoiding traditional market dynamics, such activities have given rise to accusations of price fixing. These problems cast doubts on the fairness and openness of rental pricing, as well as the wider ramifications for tenants who must deal with rising expenses in the absence of sufficient regulatory monitoring. The situation gets even worse on other angles. The escalating expenses associated with education have turned into a substantial financial strain for both learners and their families. When inflation is taken into account, the price of a four-year college has increased from $10,000 to $29,000 since 1980. This dramatic rise exceeds the expected growth in profits from higher education by a wide margin. A college graduate's annual income in 1980 was $100,000. After many decades, that amount has only increased to $188,000, a meager 18% gain, due to the fact that students and their families are paying ever greater tuition without seeing an increase in income. This discrepancy emphasizes the declining return on investment for higher education. The issue of administrative bloat is one important element driving up the expense of higher education. The rise in college enrollment between 1976 and 2018 was accompanied by an even greater increase in administrative personnel. Administrative jobs increased by 64%. Non-teaching professions witnessed a startling 452% growth, and full-time professors climbed by 92%. The high operational expenses for schools are a result of this disproportionate expansion in administrative responsibilities, and those costs are subsequently passed on to the students in the form of higher tuition and fees. Higher education institutions are also increasing their expenditures on infrastructure, consultants, and amenities, all of which drive up expenses without contributing to improved student learning. And since there are already $1.7 trillion in outstanding student loan obligations, the student debt crisis has grown to be a serious problem. Over the previous 20 years, this debt has increased at a rate twice as fast as earnings. And a rising number of students are depending on loans to pay for their education, which might have long-term negative economic implications. Today, graduates frequently struggle to become financially stable because they have less money available to them after paying off their student loans, which limits their capacity to invest or save. They are also compelled to choose higher-paying careers over areas they are enthusiastic about due to debt, which might stifle creativity and work happiness. To address these issues and make education more accessible and economically advantageous for coming generations, financing for higher education has to be reevaluated with an emphasis on cutting back on pointless administrative expenses. Young people's growing personal debt is a serious problem that is indicative of larger economic difficulties. Young adults are increasingly depending on credit to make ends meet as living expenses have increased, but salaries have remained stagnant. The amount owed on credit card has increased by 26%, vehicle debt by 14%, and mortgage debt by 44% since 2013. Even though they make 133% less money than they did in 2013, young people are taking on greater debt to pay for growing bills and inadequate income. Their increasing personal debt load reduces their financial flexibility, which makes it challenging to invest, save for future objectives, and efficiently handle unforeseen expenses. Trends in government debt are, on the whole, making the economy more unstable. The amount of debt held by the US government has increased 3 times faster than GDP during the last 60 years, totaling an astounding $35 trillion. The magnitude of the current budget imbalance is demonstrated by the fact that this amount of debt is only equal to the costs incurred during World War II. The US government pays interest on $624 billion in debt each year, or 16% of its total budget. The amount of money is significant enough to pay off all of the nation's student debt in 3 years, demonstrating how resources meant for other important areas are being diverted towards loan service. The situation is made worse by the size of the national and unfunded liability of the United States. Although the overall amount of national debt is $35 trillion, it rises to an alarming $123.3 trillion when state-level debt, unfunded pension liabilities, and other commitments are taken into account. The obligation for Social Security and Medicare alone total $80 trillion. With an average of $150,000 in debt per American, this enormous burden is expected to be borne mostly by future generations. Given that the national debt would need an estimated $600,000 in taxes per person, those under 50 will face considerably more difficulties. And what about the economic future? In the US, starting a family is becoming more and more difficult for many young people as the price of housing, healthcare, and education rise. Due to the burden of mounting debt and living expenditures, family planning is becoming less common or is being abandoned entirely by some. The fact that fewer young people are becoming parents has wider societal ramifications since it may lead to a drop in the birth rate. Lower birth rates may eventually result in a declining labor force and lower economic output, which might make it more difficult to care for an older population. The existing political rift makes it extremely difficult to come up with workable economic solutions. The party divide frequently causes divisive discussion and deadlock, which makes it challenging to put into effect the kind of comprehensive policies required to deal with problems like growing expenses, debt, and changing demographics. Even while both major parties admit the issues, there is little agreement on the suggested remedies and a lot of disagreement. For example, one side might support higher social expenditures and debt relief, while the other might favor lower government intervention and budgetary constraints. This gap can impede development and postpone important changes, resulting in unsolved economic issues and worsening the difficulties affecting the younger generation. Overcoming these political barriers is necessary to develop practical, cross-party solutions for the social and economic future of the United States. To stabilize the economy, policies must boost family formation, manage growing living expenses, and increase immigration. Leaders must simultaneously negotiate political differences to enact policies that guarantee sustained economic development and stability. Otherwise, the average American is totally screwed. So what do you think about America's economic present situation and how it will affect the future? Do you believe that things can get better? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.